So I'm delighted to welcome Merck Mercuriadis today. He is the founder of and CEO of Hipgnosis Songs Fund, an investment company established to offer investors a pure play exposure to songs and associated musical intellectual property rights. Hipgnosis Songs Fund floated on the London Stock Exchange in the summer of 2018. Through Hipgnosis, he has established songs as an asset class, driving the now booming catalogue market and investing over $2 billion in some of the most amazing songs of all time. Merck is also a veteran artist manager, having worked with globally successful recording artists such as Nile Rodgers, Elton John, Guns N' Roses, Morrissey, Iron Maiden, and Beyonce, and hit songwriters such as Diane Warren, Justin Tranter, and The Dream. So, yeah, not a bad bio there.
I am.
All right. So, well, thank you again for joining us today. And I wanted to kick off just to talk a little bit about your year so far, because you've been busy. You know, in the last couple of weeks alone, you've snapped up the Red Hot Chili Peppers catalog, the Andrew Watt catalog, and then of course you announced some much bigger deals as well at the beginning of the year. So I wanted to kind of ask how 2021 has been for Hipgnosis so far, and are you on track with your goals?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, obviously, to be able to start the year with people like Neil Young joining the family, and Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, and Jimmy Iovine, Shakira, of course. And I've been in Miami with Shakira for the last week or so, it's been a fantastic year because, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that, when we came to market, we had three goals. One was to establish songs as an asset class that could rival golden oil. The second was to use the leverage of our fund and our success and the great songs that we own to change where the songwriter sits in the economic equation, take them from the bottom of that equation to the top. And then the third was to take what I think is a broken traditional publishing model and to replace it with song management. So, within all of that, I had to get the support of the financial community, the investment community. And what I'm particularly proud of is that everything that we've ever told the investment community from the very first meeting more than 4 years ago through to today has either come true or been exceeded. And that's given us a lot of integrity and credibility in the community. Our results speak for themselves. We've just closed our latest fiscal year on March 31st, and those results will be announced in late June, early July. So I'm very excited for that to take place as well. But ultimately, everything that we've ever promised the investment community has been exceeded, and that is on target or been exceeded. And that's been very, very good in the establishment of songs as an asset class. That's great for Hipgnosis. It's great for our songwriters. But the truth of it is that it makes it great for all songwriters and all rights owners as well, because now, this is a proven asset class, and these are very, very sophisticated assets that people recognize are truly valuable.
Yeah. Excellent. And, you mentioned just now improving where the songwriter sits in the economic equation. And I know that that's a real mission for you to use your leverage with Hipgnosis. And, I'm wondering, what are you thinking about the various campaigns and inquiries that have set up to address the issues around music streaming and the economics of streaming, and particularly the conversations about, how songwriters are getting an unfair deal, and how are some of the ways you are going to actually use your leverage to improve that situation?
Sure. So, first of all, it should be said that I'm very grateful to the DCMS in the UK, the Department of Culture, Music and Sciences, that has been holding these parliamentary hearings that we've given written evidence to, and also had Nile Rodgers appear in person. I believe, and I've continued to have meetings with parliamentary members, throughout this year. And if you asked me 3 years ago when Hipgnosis got off the ground, I would have told you that I expected that this would be, that this part of the mission to change where the songwriter sits in the economic equation would have taken as many as 10 years to come to fruition. I now rather hopefully think that it's more like 7 years for it to come to fruition. And I mean 7 years in total. So I expect to see results in the next, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I think that what's taking place with the DCMS is very, very strong. When they announced their initiative, I think it was worded something along the lines of, an inquiry into the business practices of the music streaming services. Our, written evidence and in-person evidence basically said to them, listen, we appreciate what you're setting out to do here, but we think that once you really start to peel away the layers of this onion, that you are going to discover that this is really an investigation into the business practices of the major record labels and the control that they have over the major publishing companies that stop those publishing companies from advocating for songwriters. And, when you look at the economics of streaming, where a pound of income is 30p going to Apple or Spotify, now you can make an argument that 30p should become 27p or 25p, and those arguments will, I'm sure, be made, and I'm sure they'll come to fruition. But it's not really the material point. The material point is what happens to that other 70p or 70 cents if you're in the US. And depending on where you are in the world, that's something in the neighborhood of 58.5 cents, 55p going to the record company. They're paying most artists on a sale rather than on a license. So instead of splitting that money with the artist, they're taking the vast majority of it. They're paying about 9 cents on the dollar. So they're clearing the better part of 50 cents, 50p on every dollar. And then the remaining 11.5 cents to 15p, depending, as I say, where you are in the world, is being shared amongst 4 or 5 songwriters on a song and their publishers. And that crazy disparity is, only down to the fact that the 3 biggest recorded music companies in the world own and control the 3 biggest publishing companies. And at a point in time when the songwriter has, never been, it sounds crazy to think of the songwriter as anything other than the most important person in the room. But obviously, we're in a paradigm today where almost every record that is successful has an outside songwriter on it. There hasn't been a Billboard top 100 album of the year in 7 years. Bob Dylan's last studio album, but one, that didn't have an outside songwriter on it. Right. So everything from Coldplay, a new record with Max Martin this week, obviously their previous big successes, prior to this new record were with Stargate. But from Coldplay straight through to Dua Lipa, everyone is reliant on an outside songwriter, and these people need to be rewarded properly. And my mission is to work on behalf of the songwriting community and the artist community to ensure that the artist and the songwriter get their fair share of the pie. And when you look at the economics of today's music industry, where you have billions of pounds flowing in thanks to streaming, there was an argument that used to be made 20 years ago, the last time that there was a real argy-bargy about what the songwriter gets paid, that, the songwriter should stay where they are because record companies had to make these massive capital investments in artists in the form of A&R. And, what that cost was relative to overall revenues has changed dramatically. When you look at Warner's or Universal's numbers or Sony's numbers today, not only have their A&R costs gone down relative to their overall earnings, but there's in fact plenty of money in the kitty to pay the songwriter. And there's actually plenty of money to not only in the kitty to not only pay the songwriter, but to also pay the artist properly as well. And, we're catalysts for that. We're catalysts for this to change. And it's not just the majors, there's also reform that has to take place amongst the performing rights societies as well. These numbers that have come out from the PRS where, as much as a third of of songwriters' income that's coming into a not-for-profit organization is being paid out in salaries and overheads is ridiculous. And I've seen, recent interviews where, the head of PRS is being asked about whether or not the songwriter should be paid more money. And her responses to that are very vanilla. And we can no longer afford to be vanilla about this. I did an interview the other day with Bob Lefsetz for Canadian Music Week. And I think about half an hour into the interview, Bob said to me, "Merck, enough already. You've said this 5 times. And my response to that was to say, no, but Bob, that's exactly the point. You have to say it 5 times. You have to say it 10 times. You have to say it 100 times, because right now it's important that we deliver this change for the songwriter and the songwriting community. And it's been very easy to sweep under the carpet in the past. But what streaming does is, in addition to having saved the music industry and me being able to look someone like you in the eye and say the best years of the music industry are in front of it, what it's done beyond that is that it is also giving us data that makes it very easy to make a case for the songwriter to be paid more money. Mm. And I'm delighted that and very grateful that this is something that the DCMS is recognizing. And I think we'll see, strong results from the DCMS, or at least I'm very hopeful.
Yeah. And talk about this Songwriters Guild that you are planning on launching.
Well, that's, look, this is an important part of holding everyone's feet to the fire, right? So, the way that I see it, I've made approximately 150 deals in Hipgnosis, and I've de-risked the futures at the same time as I've been advocating for songwriters. I've also de-risked the futures for, 150 odd songwriters that I've made deals with. And I've put those people that are amongst the most important songwriters in the world in a position where the decisions that they make in the future are not decisions about how they're going to pay their rent tomorrow or pay for their car or their kid to go to school or whatever the case might be, but they can now be decisions about what's in their best interest. And that can be as simple as, deciding to, which studio they want to go into or who they want to allow into their room to work with and write songs with and on behalf of. But it also extends to making decisions that are in the best interest of the songwriting community. So I'm forming a Songwriters Guild that will be manned by the most important songwriters in the world. It'll be announced during the course of this summer. And the goal is very, very simple, which is to ensure that any discussion that takes place going forward is one that has this, that affects how a songwriter is paid, is one that has the songwriter at the table. And by that, I want to be very clear, which is to have songwriters at the table that are expressing views and towing a line that is what the songwriting community has agreed. I've had people turn around to me and say, well, the PRS have songwriters on some of their boards, et cetera. And I, number one, understand that and appreciate it. But what those songwriters are doing on those boards is giving a perspective, giving their personal perspective of what they see, what they think, how they think things should go forward, et cetera. What I'm talking about here is people who are representing the songwriting community that are expressing the consensus views of the songwriting community, not their personal views. And, you know, when we look at the strength of something like the Screenwriters Guild in America, where they walk into the movie companies every 3 years or so, and they basically say, listen, it's wonderful that you've got all these movie stars to, you know, be in these films, but basically there's no film to make unless you have my script, and you're not going to get my script or my writer's script unless you're paying them properly. And, you know, as I've said many times, you know, every 3 years they scream and they shout at each other, they call each other names, they threaten to bring production to a standstill. But at the end of the day, they figure out a way of paying the writers more money. The production continues to take place. And as they say in Hollywood, everyone lives happily ever after. That's never happened in the music business, right? No one, and I'm not looking for a disruptive event, and I don't believe there ever needs to be a disruptive event, because I think it's now more evident than ever, even in the major record companies, that the songwriter is the most important person in the room. You know, we've gone from a paradigm where the most important people in your Rolodex were your artists and their managers, right? Today, it's not, right? Today, you know, you need Andrew Watt on your Rolodex. You need Benny Blanco in your Rolodex. You need Jack Antonoff in your Rolodex. You need Taylor Parks in your Rolodex. You need Ali Tamposi or the Monsters and Strangers, you know, because these are the people that deliver the songs that make people like Dua Lipa and so many other wonderful artists help them to be successful. And the difference between giving your song one place or giving it another is the difference between you having a hit and someone else having a hit. So the value of the songwriter has never been greater, and it's just time to recognize that. And I'm not, you know, so we're clear, I'm not anti-majors, and I'm not, and I recognize that there are amazing people that work in these companies. The problem is that they're working under a paradigm that doesn't reflect the role of the songwriter in today's business, and that doesn't recognize the incredible work that they do. And that paradigm is not their fault, but they have to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And, you know, my prediction is that once Universal floats, and that, you know, Lucien and Co. have established themselves, you know, not only is the 900-pound gorilla in the music business, but what I believe will be $100 billion, if not €100 billion company by the time it's 5 or 6 months into its float, that everyone will recognize that there's plenty of money to go around for the songwriter.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I feel like we have a lot of very happy songwriters in the chat. It was saying that you're their hero.
You know, this is, for me, this is very, you know, Hipgnosis was created for this mission. I understood, you know, in managing great songwriters like Diane Warren and The Dream and Nile Rodgers and, you know, developing Justin Tranter and other people, I recognized that the songwriter was not getting their fair share. I also recognized that if I went public with my feelings on why that was the case, that I would get swatted like a fly unless I had some real financial wherewithal and a platform from which to fight the fight. And that was why I created Hipgnosis. You know, every meeting that I've ever had with investors has highlighted not only the motive, which of course is to make money for them and for me and our songwriters and everyone else involved, but it's also highlighted the ulterior motive, which is to use our leverage to change where the songwriter sits in the economic equation. And you know, those investors who are you know, very powerful in their own right. These are some of the biggest institutional investors in the world who have political clout and who now fully understand what the plight of the songwriter is and what needs to be done from the perspective of legislation are prepared to use their influence alongside Hipgnosis influence to change this. And, I often have people say to me that, when I am critical of the majors and the role that they play because of their control of the three big publishing companies, in holding the songwriter back, that, they say, well, how can you blame them when, this is something that is determined by legislation? And the response to that is really easy, which is that legislation is a product of advocacy and lobbying. And how can you expect the songwriter, the true position of the songwriter to be reflected properly in legislation if the three biggest companies in the world are not, that should be the loudest, are not advocating and fighting for the songwriter, not because they don't want to. Trust me, Jody Gerson, Big John, Guy Moot, they want to fight for the songwriter as much as they can, but they are owned and controlled by the three biggest recorded music companies in the world.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And that's reflected in the legislation that we see.
Yeah. Well, I also wanted to touch on what's going on in the industry at the moment. We're seeing artist service companies really gaining so much traction and power in recent years. And, for example, Downtown just sold all their copyrights to Concord to focus on these services. And, there's a lot of other companies that are offering these services to artists and songwriters and funding options that allows them to take more control and more kind of ownership of their rights. And I just wanted to know kind of what were your thoughts on this and how all of this aligns with what you're doing or possibly affects what you're doing.
Well, the first and most important thing to say is this, is that, there was a movement in the music industry, 10, 12, 13 years ago that, created the belief or the possibility that the internet and technology would be all an artist needed, right? And you saw, Radiohead self-releasing records and asking people to pay whatever they wanted to pay for them, and lots of other experiments that, were semi-successful or not successful at all. But what really you learn from those experiments is this, is that there is no replacement for having, a couple of thousand people around the world or something smaller than that, that are going to be walking into, radio stations and DSPs and newspapers and music magazines and TV shows and things like that, with people that are the best local messengers, that have the most integrity, and making a case as to why you should support, whether it's Dua Lipa or Griff, who were both successful last night at the Brits, and congratulations to them, or whether it's Radiohead or whoever the artist might be. So I've never believed that there would be a replacement for an infrastructure that would support the efforts of an artist. I've always felt that that was essential to an artist having success. And of course, up to this point, the majors have had those infrastructures, and they've also had great people working for them. And, if I had a record, with Nile Rodgers and Chic or whoever it might be, Shakira, that's going out tomorrow, I know that I need the best person in Brazil. Me calling from, 6,000 miles away, is not going to, create the relationship that's necessary to make the difference. It might make some level of difference, but having the best local messenger is always going to be very, very important. So, what I love about label services, and I think Downtown are going to be a very interesting player. Obviously, AWOL are an interesting player, and The Orchard are, and many others. Some are associated with major companies, some are not associated with major companies. They are giving the artist an opportunity to be able to release their records with a powerful infrastructure behind them around the world, and at the same time be in a position where they own those records. And that's very powerful, and therefore I applaud it. And I believe that these companies will get better and better at what they do. When AWOL was under Cobalt's control, prior to the recent sale, they were obviously doing tremendous work on behalf of their clients. And when you look at the development of, an artist like Lauv, for example, that is able to have that kind of success while at the same time, owning his records, it's very powerful and it's very compelling. I also believe that it's forcing the majors to change, and record companies in general, to change their model, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, like for me, if you were to take your record to Universal or to Warner or to Sony, and you were able to make a deal that said, listen, you can be my partner in this. I'm going to lease you my music. I'm going to pay you a very strong, I, the artist, am going to pay you a very strong fee for delivering your infrastructure and working on behalf of my record. But this is my record, and let's create a 360 pool. And maybe on day one, when you're making a capital investment, you're getting 80% of that pool and I'm getting 20% of it. But then the more and more the record becomes successful, the more it shifts to the other direction, where I'm eventually getting 80% and you're eventually getting 20%. I love the fact that all of this activity amongst label services is going to, I just see that someone called Chris has said, flip the script. And Chris is exactly right. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is flipping the script. But I recognize that these infrastructures are not inexpensive. So you literally have to be prepared to walk in. And I love lawyers, not really. I love accountants, not really. But the reality is that the community of people that support artists and songwriters, be those lawyers, be they accountants, be they managers, have to be smart about this evolution, right? Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of money to make a record successful. It takes a big infrastructure to make a record successful. For the most part, there are examples that where you can paint a picture that's not necessary, but they are far and few in between. Right. So you have to be prepared to go in and say, look, I want you to have 80% of the money to begin with, until you have to stop funding this and it can and the money really starts to roll in. But then it's going to gradually change from that 80-20 to 70-30 to 60-40 to 50-50 to 40-60 to 30-70 to 20-80, to the point where I'm just paying you a fee to be a part of my team, but you're a part of my team. I'm not a part of your team. You're not lending me money to build a house that I then pay back out of 1/5 of the money and that you end up owning. I own this house from day one. You either like me enough and think I'm important enough to recognize that that's the construct that I'm willing to work under, or I'll find somebody else who is. And I really genuinely believe that there are forward-thinking people in Warner and forward-thinking people in Sony that will make these sort of deals. And then, I suspect that will be where Universal ends up as well. But there's no question that the label services companies that you're referencing are, forcing the hand of the majors to change the way that they do business.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point. And I think, again, lots of happy songwriters and artists in the chat. So it's good to see. So one thing I wanted to touch on was the fact that, we're now in a global music economy. And you said something really interesting recently in an interview. You mentioned that you are in the middle of doing a deal with Tencent in China, where you are allowing them to reinterpolate some of the Hipgnosis copyrights and create new IP for the Chinese market. So I really wanted to kind of hear a little bit more about that, and and where you think, the opportunities could be in these emerging markets? And do you think that somewhere down the line you might be acquiring the catalogs of a Burna Boy or the next K-pop songwriter?
Well, Burna Boy and Bosse and Kirk Harding, they're my family. So I would make a deal with Burna Boy in the space of a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also make deals, when we look at the great Nigerian artists, and African artists that are the Beatles and the Led Zeppelins of their world, whether that's, King Sunny Ade or Salif Keita or Chief Ebenezer Obey. I would be, Fela, I would be making deals with these artists in a heartbeat right now. The emerging markets are very, very relevant for a number of reasons. One, because obviously, for the most part in the past, whether it's Africa, whether it's India, whether it's China, these have been illicit markets where, because of the economy and the local GDP, people would go to the local bodega and they would buy the bootleg version of the CD or the cassette before it for $1, a pound, whatever it might be. And of course, none of that money ever made its way back to the artists. And I'd probably posit that someone like King Sunny Ade or Salif Keita, despite the fact that they've got 20, 30 albums in their catalogs, they probably never made those albums from the perspective of making money off of them. They made them from the point of view of giving people a reason to pay money to come and see them play live. Mm-hmm. Whereas now this is a very legitimate business, because instead of giving that pound to the local bodega, you've now got your smartphone and you're giving that pound to the people that own it. And of course, it's not at the level that it is in the UK or in the US, but it's still real money that's making its way. Equally well for Western artists, I'm a very, very proud custodian of Neil Young's catalog, of Lindsey Buckingham's catalog, of the Journey catalog, the Bon Jovi catalog, Nile and Chic, and so many more. And these are all, I've chosen that group of artists to mention because they're all artists that have got somewhere between 35 years and 60 years of the most enormous success in the world, right? But they've never made any money from India. They've never made any money from China. They've never made any money from Africa. And that's all changing now. Apple's moves last summer to open in 30 odd countries, Spotify's moves earlier this year to again open in, another 30 or so deeper countries, means that, places like Senegal and the Congo are actually contributing to the worldwide, music economy at this point. And for the first time ever, Journey's Don't Stop Believing is getting money from places like the Congo and Senegal, which is pretty remarkable. But ultimately, if you look at India as an example, as little as 16 or 17 months ago, the consumption of international repertoire in India was 8%, right? They obviously grew up on Bollywood, they grew up on Indian folk music, Indian classical music. They had some sense of our, international Western stars, but they didn't have ready access, right? So, beyond getting a Beatles record or something, if you were looking for something more obscure than that, even famous, it wasn't easy. But now with streaming, you have access to everything worldwide at the push of a button. And the consumption of international repertoire in India in that period of time has gone from 8% to 42%, right? And the same thing is going to happen in Africa, and the same thing is going to happen in China. So, going back to your question about Tencent, my view is that, in a world that is constantly, in a Western world that is constantly interpolating music and taking old songs and creating new IP out of them. I mean, I've just approved, with the artists and the songwriters' consent, because even though I don't need it, I will always go to the songwriter and the artist and get their consent if someone is going to reinterpret their work, because my name's not on these records. Their name is on these records. These are the records that they created, the songs that they created. And if someone is going to do something with their work, I will always, regardless of what the agreement might say or whether they've sold, make sure that they have the opportunity to say yes or no if something's being created. But my view was, well, hold on a second. Let's take these incredible, verses, hooks, melodic ideas, and let China as an experiment with Tencent be able to reinterpret these, create new songs that can be big hits in the Chinese and the Asian marketplace, again with our songwriters and artists' approval, and see if we can't do something to really make the world even smaller than what it is by taking these incredible songs and giving them a new domestic lease of life in, as I say, some of the biggest markets in the world. And all of our songwriters have bonuses built into their deals. So if we're able to create more income, then they're going to get paid more money. And as I say, as long as it works artistically. So I have no idea yet what the results will be. And as long as I say, as long as it meets with the approval of the creators, then we'll give it a go. And I think that it could really be something that works.
Right. Yeah, I'm very curious to see what the results are. It sounds really interesting. So I wanted to touch on the acquisition market at the moment. Obviously, it's very busy. Multiples keep going up, and there's more supply and more demand. But can this continue to grow at the rate it is? And how long will this go on for?
Well, it's a very good question, of course, right? Because it can't go on forever. One of my fight on behalf of the songwriting community, my ability to be able to have that fight is based on having a healthy company, right? Because that healthy company gives me billions of pounds of leverage to fight this fight. If I make poor commercial decisions and I don't have a healthy company, I won't be able to continue this fight. But all of that is logical talk in the context of the fact that these song catalogs have been undervalued for way too long. I don't want to pick on the major companies again, but I think I've said something many times, and I really believe it to be true, which is that in the past there was because they were the only players, bar one or two, there was what Universal, Warner, and Sony told you that it was worth, and then there was what it was really worth, right? And we are here to recognize the value of great work. We're here to pay the songwriters properly, and we're here to then manage their legacies and the incredible songs that they've created with real responsibility. Because one of the things that I hate about traditional publishing is that they haven't demarcated the management of great songs with the desire to create new songs, right? So the 99.9% of the focus of major publishing companies and even independent publishing companies is to go out and sign new songwriters and create new songs. They work very hard to put them in the right rooms with other songwriters and producers to, hopefully turn those into placements on records, turn those placements on records into hits. And at the end of the day, the ratio is something like 1 in 10. One of them becomes wildly successful enough to pay for the 9 that failed. And they use the passive income of the great catalogs that they own to underwrite that business. And the reason why it's passive income is because they've got as many as 20,000 songs per person, And you can't possibly manage a catalog that has 20,000 songs per person, working for you in it, particularly if your real focus is on creating new songs in the first place. So, for me, the management of great songs is very, very important, and taking those songs and managing them with the same sort of responsibility that I manage human beings, and having a ratio of 500 songs to 1,000 songs per person is going to add value. And it's also going to ensure that that artist's or songwriter's legacy is enhanced and protected at the same time. So, that ability to be able to add value allows you to recognize what you're paying the songwriter, for their assets. So I think that, certainly from a Hipgnosis point of view, I think that there are 2 to 3 years of strong buying in front of us. But I think that at that point in time, we'll have grown from being, a near £2 billion company to being a £4 or £5 billion company. We'll have grown from the 63,000 songs that we have today. So we have a very, very small catalog, but with a very, very high ratio of success within it. Over 5,000 songs are number one songs. I think it's 15,000 songs are top 10 songs. About 40,000 of them are top 40 songs. So very, very small catalog, but with a very high ratio of success within it. We'll have grown that from the 63,000 that it is today to somewhere between 120,000 and 150,000 songs. And that will be the ceiling for our growth, because I'm trying, as I said before, the third part of the objective is to create song management as a paradigm. And, you can't, I don't think you can manage more than 150,000 songs, because I think that'll take 250 people to do it well. And being able to manage more than 250 people is a chore in itself. So there's a ceiling to our growth. We'll go from being an active buyer to just being completely focused on managing the songs with responsibility and getting more out of them. And what I hope is that example will spit up a lot of other song management companies that replicate exactly what we do. In that 5 years from now and 10 years from now, a young songwriter or a young artist isn't just saying, who's my manager, who's my booking agent, who's my publisher, who's my record company, who's my publicist, but they're also saying, who's my song manager, right? And that song management becomes something that people recognize as necessary, because, when you have these incredible songs that are allowed to languish in these big publishing companies, that's not the fault of the people working at the publishing companies. That's the fault of the construct that has millions of songs under one roof, that you can only have a rational number of people and a rational number of people that you can manage in that space. And that just allows these great songs to languish.
Yeah. And I'm sure we have a lot of publishers joining us today. So I do want to know, in 10 years' time, you mentioned 5 years' time, 10 years' time, is that realistic? Do you really think that, the concept of publishing will be kind of turned on its head?
I really do. And I think that there's, I think you'll see the big companies, and every company have a division that creates new IP and have a company that manages so you got, a group of people that are focused on creating songs. So, because, when you look at publishing companies today, right, the most expensive people in publishing companies are the creative people that are identifying and putting the time and the effort in to put those young songwriters into the right rooms to make them successful. And they deserve every penny they get, because they do a great job. But these companies have to put the same amount of money into, like when you look at Hipgnosis, we've got the Ted Kockles, we've got the Amy Thompsons, we've got the Kenny McPhersons and the Tom Stingemores and the Patrick Joyces and the Joe Maginis, and people that are the very, very best marketing people, the sort of marketing people that are normally reserved for record companies, not publishing companies, in order to be able to deliver on the management of these great songs. And I think that going forward, you'll see us in the same way that companies like AWOL and Downtown will force the hands of the majors by providing artist services. You'll see companies like ours, as I say, spinning up other song management companies, and those all, and the combination of all that will also force the majors into having real demarcation between song management and song creation. So at Hipgnosis, I look at it as three things. I look at, song management, I look at song creation, and I look at song administration. And those are three very different things that allow song management to do its very best, that allow song creation to do its very best, and that allow song administration to do its very best. But ultimately, before we get to that point, what I'm really the most hopeful of is that you'll see real regulation put in place that stops major record companies from being able to control major publishing companies. Because when I make these criticisms, people think I'm being critical of, as I say, of the people or of the publishing companies or of I mean, what I'm critical of is the paradigm, right? But there's nobody, when you think about it in today's world, what Jody Gerson is doing at Universal is incredible. What Big John is doing at Sony is incredible. What Guy and Carrie Ann are doing at Warner is incredible. They're identifying songwriters. They're working really hard to, as I say, put them in the rooms, make them successful, turn those placements into hits, et cetera. And they are providing, along with the best indies like Hipgnosis Songs Group in the US, they are providing the most important songwriters, and Cobalt as well, to smaller companies like Good Soldier. They're providing the most important component to an artist having a hit, right? So if you're any one of these major publishing companies and you're delivering a songwriter that is, the one that's making your record company all the money, why are you only getting 1/5 of the money when your record company is getting 4/5 of the money? Why are you only getting 1/5 of the margin when your record company is getting 4/5 of the margin? It's a songwriter's world, right? And, we're lucky to live in it.
Right, I love that. Well, it's almost a great place to end, but I do want to ask you, just before you go, any hints on your next big announcement or acquisition?
No, there's a lot to come. There might be one even as early as tomorrow. Okay. Being a public company, I can't give hints, but there's a lot to come, and I'm super excited about them, and I'm very grateful to the songwriters and the artists and the producers that have entrusted me with these great songs that they've created. Yeah. Jimmy Iovine, who I'm obviously very proud to have at as part of Hipgnosis, and the incredible records that he made with people like Tom Petty and Patti Smith and Stevie Nicks and U2. He did an interview with Music Business Worldwide yesterday that Tim published, and the headline is, it's not about you, and that was advice that was given to him by John Landau, Bruce Springsteen's manager, 40 years ago. And that's something that I truly understand. I can't play the guitar, I can't sing a song, I can't write a song. What gives me a seat at the table with these incredible songwriters and artists and producers is that I take my responsibility seriously, and I do what I can do, which they can't, which is I advocate on behalf of this community, and I fight for this community to get what it deserves. And as I said, it's a songwriter's world, and we're lucky to live in it.
Right. Excellent. Well, Merck, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
All the best. Thank you, Emma.
I'll let you get back to Shakira now.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye. All right. Well, that's pretty much a wrap. Thank you so much to Merck, and thank you so much to all our panelists today for joining. I'm just gonna share the final screen. There we go. So yeah, again, thank you so much for joining. And if you have any questions, please do get in touch at inquiries@synchtank.com. You can email me directly at emma@synchtank.com. Do stay tuned to our blog, because there will be some highlights from these sessions on there. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone will receive a recording as well, so you can catch up or rewatch something. So yeah, it's been a great event, and I hope everyone stays safe and well, and thank you again.